Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien and Bubba here on the morning of Sunday, May 16th, 2021. Stand by for commentary. Well, today's commentary is on Palestine, a disaster for over 100 years. And the reason I say a disaster is because it's a man-made disaster. And for you who are protesting on both sides, for the Israeli side, I said, and this is not being derogatory or put down on either side, either the Palestinians or the Israelis. I have no side in this. I'm just telling you this is what happened. And the problem is that nobody's looking at it this way, and you got to find an answer soon, or the only answer would be to wipe out each other's side. Okay? The problem goes back to AD 70, when Romans, after the Battle of Masada, eliminated the Jews from the Holy Land, or Palestine as they call it. The Romans really did a good job at that. But unlike the Babylonians 500 years earlier, where after Babylon fell, the Jews came back. Well, unfortunately, the Romans in Palestine, under the Romans and later the Byzantine Empire, kept Palestine for another 600 years after AD 70. Then the Muslims, who were Muhammad's followers, took over the area in the late 600s AD, and they held it till around 900 AD, when the Seljuk Turks, as they were called, Muslims too, but different. They were Turks. They were not Arabs. Turks and Arabs are different. That's like saying that Iranians and Arabs. They're both Muslims, but they're different. So the Seljuk Turks controlled the area from 900 till around 1099, and you know what happens there. Well, then the Christians controlled the area from 1099 to 1187. Okay? When the Arabs under Saladin finally controlled it, under Arab control. But that didn't last long, because around 1430, the Turks came back under the Ottomans Empire, and they defeated the Mamelukes, which were the Egyptian Arabs who controlled the Palestines. And thus Palestine was controlled by the Ottoman Empire from around 1600, I believe, to 1918. Now, when World War I ended and the Ottoman Empire got dissolved, and there's one person to blame on all this, and his name is Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, because he was pushing his 14 points, yeah, which of course the Europeans told him to go stick it. And no uncertain terms either. They told him to go stick it on those 14 points. Yeah. But one thing they kept, and the worst thing of the 14 points, it was even worse than the 14 points. And this was the League of Nations. You think the United Nations is a joke? The League of Nations was actually a disaster. Not a joke, but a plain disaster. And they created disaster after disaster. Between 1918 and 1925, they created the disasters that controlled the world for the next 90 years. Give you an example. They created a country called Yugoslavia, which became a disaster in the late 1990s, and it's back to what it used to be back in the early 20th century. Montenegro, Serbia, and now you got the areas that used to be controlled by Austria-Hungary, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Yeah, right. But they did same thing to Palestine. They gave it a mandate to the British. Sorry. Besides the Americans, the British give me a chance to choke. Because they were a disaster as far as administration is concerned. They created two of the world's worst nightmares under their control. Palestine was one, India was the next one. And within a couple of years after World War II, and the British, by the way, they were responsible for the Jewish coming back into Palestine. And they had this notion, I don't know where they got it, which the United Nations went along with them. That's why I said the United Nations is a joke. When they could no longer control their territories, India or Palestine, India in 1947, they decided, hey, we can partition India into two parts, actually three parts. Now, this was the stupid part on India. How can you partition India into three parts? But they did. And a person with sense would have told them, this is crazy, people, this is crazy. The Muslims and the Hindus have lived in peace, or sort of peaceful, for centuries. And now you're creating, out of British India, you're going to create Pakistan. Well, not only Pakistan, but it was called West Pakistan and East Pakistan, separated by 1,000 miles of Indian territory. Yeah. How dumb can you get? Well, they did that in 1947. And 3 wars later, with India and Pakistan, which is now they both got nuclear power weapons. So that's still a disaster because India and Pakistan still don't like each other. Now, Pakistan, unfortunately, would lose East Pakistan because there's 1,000 miles of Indian territory. So in 1971, East Pakistan didn't want anything to do with West Pakistan and asked India for help, which they did, and it caused a war. The 1971 war, which created Bangladesh. Yes. And thus we got a disaster today because India and Pakistan, that's the West Pakistan, it's known as Pakistan today, okay? West Pakistan. Because East Pakistan is known as Bangladesh, and it's got problems of its own. It's got too many people, and it has a lot of problems with low-lying areas, and a lot of disasters have occurred since 1971. So Bangladesh is a bankrupt, very poor country. The West Pakistan, which is now Pakistan, is becoming a very, very real threat to India proper. And they are skirmishing once in a while. Like I said, they had a little wars in between there. So that's the problem there. Now over here in Palestine, the British decided to do the same stupid thing. We'll partition Palestine because we controlled, we'll partition in the part that we called Transjordan. We'll make it into Jordan. We'll take a little piece of the West Bank there that's kind of, and call it the West Bank, and put that into Jordan's control. And a little sliver on the left, and we'll call it the Gaza Strip, and put it under Egyptian control. So in 1948, Israel was declared a nation because they wanted to eliminate their Jewish problems in the Western world so that the Jews would have a homeland to go to. Mind you, they hadn't had a homeland to go to in over 1900 years. And to create Israel after 1900 years was a disaster. Well, that's said and done. We're over 70 years with that. Now we got to live with it. Israel exists, and it has a right to exist now. Okay? So we got to deal with that today. But here, what did that cost? It cost the Jordanians, who didn't like the Palestinians, and they controlled the West Bank. The Egyptians, who didn't like the Palestinians, who controlled the Gaza Strip. And those guys from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, like today, were giving Israel fits. And mind you, as soon as they declared Israel as a state and Jordan as a state, there was a war declared against Israel, which culminated by the Arab defeat in 1949. Then Israel decided to really stick it to them with the British, who were mad about Mr. Gamal Abdel Nasser confiscating their old Suez Canal in 1952. Yeah, big time. So they decided to invade Egypt. The French, the English, and the Israelis. Oh yeah, 1956. And the guy who should have come to the aid and eliminate this and create the disaster that we was Dwight David Eisenhower. He's the one who forced the British and the French and the Israelis out of the Suez Canal and out of Sinai in 1956. That irked the Israelis, and they consider that a grudge. Even though the United States is, quote, their best friend. Yeah. But no, they still got a grudge. And believe me, Jews carry a grudge. And this is what I'm saying to you Americans. Like the African Americans, you guys carry your hate from generation to generation to generation. So does the Jews and so does the Palestinians. They carry the generation of hate. Ever since the Romans defeated them in AD 70, they've had all this hate. And it's gone from generation to generation to generation. And they are a closed society. God made us his people. Only his. Really? I don't understand Jews for that. Because everybody is God's people. No matter if you're good or bad. He made you with free will. And this is what I don't understand about the Jews. You created this hatred problem. The Palestinians created this hatred problem because it's generation after generation after generation. The British caused this mess. The Europeans caused this mess when they created the League of Nations because of Woodrow Wilson. Yeah. So we're dealing with a mess that was created over 120 years ago. Or 100 years ago today, probably. And what are we going to do about it? Well, they're now fighting again over there. People are dying on both sides, left and right. And they're saying a two-state solution. That's not going to work. Two-state solution, the British tried with Pakistan, East and West Pakistan and India. They tried it again with Jordan because they thought that all the Arabs would go to Jordan. Or Egypt on the Gaza Strip. Yeah. Didn't work then, did it? Nobody owns Palestine. Palestine's been a pain in the people's rear end for centuries. And this is where you got to look at it and say, what are we going to do with this pain in the ass piece of land that's causing us problems for centuries? You have to sit down and talk and say, this is the way it's going to be. No more hatred from generation to generation. If you do that, we excommunicate you from this planet and literally throw them in space. I would. It's about time that you get together with these people and say, you got the West Bank, you got the Gaza Strip. Leave Israel alone, they'll leave you alone. What you do with Egypt, that's your problem. What you do with Jordan is your problem. And the Jordanians. Do you want neighbors like that on your borders? Egyptians? Do you want neighbors like the Palestinians on your borders? That's what you got to sit down and talk to about. But no, I don't see anybody doing this. I see President Biden, we got to stop the ceasefire. That's not going to do any good. There's been ceasefires all over the place that have been gone since 1967. In over 50 years. Yes, we still got the stupid situation because nobody's got to the root of the problem. You can't blame the British anymore because, like I said, you have to do a document that says, as of this date, our ancestors are not responsible. We are not responsible for our ancestors' mistakes, even though we got to deal with them. And this is what you got to do, is deal with your ancestors' mistakes, and going forward, get them. But you're not doing that. For the commentary today, this is your favorite alien and Bubba. Your destiny is doomed. Good day.